Hi, I'm theciaellis and welcome to Grandma's Homestead. Alright, as some of you know that I've been trying to do a series on Are You Ready for the Next Great Depression? And I've decided at the same time that I'm doing that, there are things when we eat every day. So I want to learn to teach you some recipes on what to cook. You know, they always tell you rice and beans and rice. Well, how do you keep it from being such a terrible thing, you know, to eating it day in and day out, and what you could do to make it better? Today we're going to start out with a basic recipe of red beans and rice, and we're going to try to do as much of it from our pantry as possible, so that today I am going to use a real onion, but if you don't have a real onion and you've got dehydrated onion, then you know to use that instead. So I've already started with my rice, and it's cooking now, and while it's cooking, we're going to be chopping up our vegetables and getting other things ready. I've got 3 cups of water going with a little bit of olive oil. Sometimes I use butter, and I still need to put a pinch of salt in there. I've got 1.5 cups of rice, and when that gets hot enough, I'm going to add the rice and stir it, and it's going to cook for 15 minutes, and that's all I'm going to need to do for the rice. Well, I'm going to put a lid on it, turn it way down and put a lid on it and let that go for 15 minutes. So while that's going, I'm going to chop my onion. I've got this is bone broth that I do. It tells you, the recipe tells you can use vegetable stock or any sort of bone broth, diced tomatoes, red beans, and mixed vegetables. And you go, what? And some different this is something that some people don't pay attention to when they're getting their pantry together. What are the spices, the herbs and spices that you use to cook with? You need to have those in your pantry also. So this does ask for chili powder, ground cumin, and ground coriander. So we're going to do that. Now I'm doing the mixed vegetables. The recipe calls for diced carrots, diced celery, and jalapeno. And so instead of doing diced carrots and and then later on it asks for for some corn too. Well, this has got some green beans and corn and some carrots in it. It's not exactly the vegetables that the recipe calls for, but this is what's in my pantry, and this will all come together for a nice red beans and rice that you can make. The vast majority, if you think about it, the only thing that's not in your pantry, and this can come from your pantry, if you buy broth at the store, you can do that. So right now, this is the only thing that has not come from my pantry that I will use, but like I said, you can use dehydrated. And then the jalapenos, the recipe does call for jalapeno. You can do without that. You can find some other, you can put a different spice in it to make up for the jalapeno. But today, my husband likes jalapenos, and we're going to put that in. So that's what we've got going. Alright, while my rice is going, I've already got my onions chopped up. And because we are dealing with pantry stuff, I like to use butter, but today we're going to use olive oil because this is something that you can put in your pantry. Put the chopped onion in here. We want to get this all kind of cooked down, kind of on a pretty low heat. Cook it down. Put some salt in it and let that go on a lower heat for a little while. We're going to let the onions cook down and let the rice cook, and then we'll start throwing everything together. Alright, now this is where I go way off the track, but I'm making dinner for my husband and he likes meat. Okay, so we got the onions and we've got them down where they're pretty kind of translucent. We are meat eaters, so I did pull some sausage out of the refrigerator or the freezer and thawed it. I have some leftover breakfast sausage that I need to use up, and then I've got some leftover chicken meat from another meal that needs to be used up too, and I'm going to throw these in with it now. Well, I'm especially going to put the sausage in there so it can start browning. Okay, my rice is done. This is sauteed up a little bit. Let's do our spices. For the chili powder, it wants 2 teaspoons. I'm just going to eyeball it. For the cumin, a tablespoon. For the coriander, it's a tablespoon. So those are my spices. We'll probably get salt and pepper at our taste here in a few minutes. Let's go ahead and get this stirred in. Let's go ahead and get some liquid in there. That's the diced tomatoes. And you know what? They always tell you to rinse the beans. I don't care. Just dump them in there. got a little bit of juice. I don't want to rinse off all the flavor. Get some broth in there. And let's get this all stirred together. Alright, now let's add the jalapeno and the chicken and the sausage. That's going to be nice and meaty. Stir that together. Now let's add our rice. That ends up making 3 cups of rice. This is going to be a nice hearty meal. Like I said, you can do the vegetarian. You don't have to add the meat. Most of the rest of this, except for the onion, has come from your pantry. Alright, now we get the vegetables. This, remember I said it asked for carrots and it asked for corn. We're just going to do the can of vegetables straight out of our pantry. Ooh, looks like I should have used a bigger pot. We'll let this go for a little bit longer, let everything heat through. That's what's nice too. Everything's already cooked, so you don't have to do anything any more cooking. I'm going to put a little bit more broth in it, and then we'll taste it. So we'll just kind of let this warm through and see how it turns out. Alright guys, I added just a touch of cayenne to it to give it a little bit more flavor, and a little bit more salt, and just a little bit more of the broth. If you look, this is how much broth I used. Was that about 1.5 cups, maybe 2 cups of broth, but put this whole thing together. And this is a wonderful red beans and rice. Like I said, I cheated with the meat, but even then, okay, so the smoked sausage did come out of the freezer, but the breakfast sausage and the chicken came from leftover meat from another meal, and this is everything else except the onion came out of my pantry. This is a good way to get started. Play with your recipes, have a good time. This will be good. Happy eating.